Hello and welcome to this Maritime London webinar exploring the reasons why an intrepid set of adventurers have decided to row unsupported through the Northwest Passage. I'm Josh Standerwick, Chief Executive of Maritime London, and I'll be moderating today's session. And we are hosting this webinar in partnership with Maritime London members Solis. If I'm honest, when Solis got in touch asking whether we could partner on a webinar focusing on the Northwest Passage, my mind immediately turned to the viability and sustainability of using the passage as a commercial shipping lane. However, when I realised that Solis was supporting a row through the passage, it is fair to say my interest was well and truly piqued. While it's not Maritime London's regular fare, I thought we simply have to publicise this incredible challenge and bring some much needed colour to our lockdown world. This webinar will explore the history of the Northwest Passage, the type of person that you need to be and the motivation behind wanting to undertake such a huge challenge, the logistics and planning required to be successful, and how the team will explore climate change and the consequential effect on life in the Arctic. We are incredibly lucky today to be joined by not just one, but two ocean rowers who are both part of the expedition and a master mariner who has more than a passing interest in the Northwest Passage. Leven Brown is one of the most experienced and highly regarded ocean rowing skippers in the world. He is a multiple Guinness World Record holder and survival expert. Leven has racked up over 30,000 nautical miles under human power. Phil Kite, after a very successful career in UK-based manufacturing at the age of 56, with an ambition to do something completely different, founded his own four-man rowing team, Team Tyne Innovation, with a goal of competing the world's toughest row, the 3,000-mile Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. That's the world's toughest row, apart from crossing the Northwest Passage, of course. Despite facing extreme weather conditions and intense physical challenges, in 2019, Team Tyne Innovation crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 42 days, 10 hours and 26 minutes, a new world record time for a mixed four. And last but not least, we have Captain John Simpson, Senior Partner at Solis Marine Consultants. John has always had a fascination for polar exploration, the Northwest Passage and the Arctic region, and has also had the privilege of working on both the Pacific and Atlantic coasts of Canada. Before we get started, I'll provide a quick run through of housekeeping notices. While we don't expect any tech issues, if we do experience any difficulties, please bear with us. We'll do our best to minimize background noise. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Maritime London YouTube channel. You can ask questions in the text box and we will do our best to cover as many as we can in the time allocated. And lastly, but very importantly, there is merchandise on offer today with a 10% discount for those attending the webinar. Right, that is more than enough from me. I will now pass over to Leven, who will provide an overview of the expedition. Leven, over to you.
Hi there, thank you very much indeed, Josh, for that very kind introduction, and thank you very much indeed to everybody who's tuning in. What I'm going to do just now is just rattle through a little presentation. I've been told to take around about 5 minutes, but I think it's going to be slightly longer than that. But we'll rattle through it as fast as possible. But if there's anything I've missed out or you think I've glossed over, then please ask some questions in the chat section. We'll try and get through your questions. Let's just start with a little bit of history on the Northwest Passage. For centuries, explorers thought a navigable passage through the Arctic. There's been dozens of attempts. Cabot, Franklin, Drake, Ross and Cook all failed. And it wasn't until Roald Amundson's 3-year expedition starting in 1903 that the route was first traversed in a 21-metre, 69-foot converted fishing boat. In 2021, 115 years after Amundson's trip, we will attempt to be the first to row the Northwest Passage in a single season. Moving on to the next slide, our proposed route is going to be going from the east to the west, which is a little bit different from the other expeditions that have attempted the Northwest Passage before. Usually they tend to go from the west to the east. We've chosen to go this way because it kind of gets the north of the expedition out of the way first, and in theory at least buys us a little bit more time to do the long stretch along the North Canadian and Alaskan coast. So the proposed route is really to leave Pond Inlet, turn into the Lancaster Sound, down through the Peel Sound. We'll attempt to go through the Victoria Strait, but this, some historians may remember, was the place that Franklin got stopped in. If the Victoria Strait is iced up, we'll divert around the bottom of, or around King William Island, below Victoria Island, and then out towards Point Barrow. Like many other routes in the Arctic, this is just a sort of plan A, and it may be subject to radical change depending on what we actually get weather-wise. Why this expedition is different? Well, the team is made up of ocean rowers and athletes, and we've accumulated over 100,000 miles of ocean rowing experience. And we've incorporated into the team those who've traversed the poles and been part of an amazing amount, an amazing range of endurance expeditions. We've also designed the boats really from the keel up. Myself and a naval architect who worked with Aston Martin called Rory Grimes. And we've developed a triple-skinned specific ice class of ocean rowing boat. The climate, ironically, this is one of these expeditions where the chances of success are improved by recent changes in the environment with the ice melting. Climate change is working in our favour, though it shouldn't be. We also wanted to emphasise that these boats are completely self-sufficient. They're carrying over 100 days worth of food and water, and it's not our intention to stop, but to pass through quietly, leaving nothing but a small wake in our way. Moving on to the crew, we spent a lot of time selecting the crew. I've handpicked crew members, explorers, ocean rowers, athletes, medics, and many other Arctic skills that our team incorporates. As we've said before, we've got over 100,000 miles of blue water rowing experience in this combined team, and it's probably one of the most formidable team of ocean rowers and athletes ever assembled. If you take a little look off to the left, you can see the caliber of people who are in this team. A little bit about the boats. The expedition will consist of 3 boats, designed by Rory Grimes, as I said earlier, and with myself putting a little bit of input of my experience of ocean rowing over the years. The boats will be 9 meters, that's 32 feet in old money. They will be self-righting, so in the event of a capsize, they will automatically come back up. They're insulated, fast and functional. Safety is paramount, and they'll be equipped with the latest navigation equipment and communication equipment as well. There was actually a question about what we would use in the event of these failures. So there'll be backups and backups for backups, and we also know how to use a sextant. We've done extensive trialling and prototypes of these boats so far. We've probably done over 200 hours in combined training in the prototype and testing, both on the water and through simulations with the computer. The the boat has actually already been rowed across the Atlantic in the 2020 Talisker race. The expedition ice class is going to be based slightly differently, a much more strong design based on a 20mm rigid foam core, a triple skin carbon Kevlar shell, which gives the strength to take on the ice and insulates the crew to keep warm. We also intend to film a documentary whilst we're rowing through the Northwest Passage. We'll produce 3 40-minute films documenting the expedition, the challenges that face the team, the environment and the wildlife encountered. The films will include first-hand accounts of the expedition from the team taken before and after the event, training sequences, team profiles and logistical preparations. The production team includes Emmy Award-winning cameraman Michael Pitts, sound editor Matt Costner, and networks interested includes the BBC, Netflix, and Discovery so far. We're getting a tremendous amount of response, to this expedition so far. The environment is going to feature very heavily in this expedition. It's what will make or break us, in fact, in terms of our attempt to get through in one season. We expect the temperatures to be generally around about -5. We may be lucky, in inverted commas, and it be a little bit warmer. And there may be temperature spikes above that mid-expedition and much below that if we get away a little bit early or have to continue a little bit late. The winds in the passage are predominantly, and by the numbers, should be predominantly northerly, with a risk of rough water in some of the more exposed area. And we're told that 50-foot waves are to be expected in bits. And one of the great risks to the expedition is, of course, the ice stopping us returning early. There's no doubt that we'll have multiple encounters with wildlife during the expedition. One of the most fearsome, of course, are the grizzly bears and the polar bears, the region's top land predators. We intend to take an ethical approach to this expedition. We're aiming to have minimal environmental impact on the Arctic, and we're using 100% renewable energy. We're engaged in conversations with the local Inuit communities where possible, and some Inuit charities as well, to ensure that we'll pass through the land with their blessing and with their knowledge. We'll adopt an unbiased approach to documenting the facts about the environment and the climate. And we'll support a good cause chosen by our sponsors and crews. And we're currently supporting Big Blue Ocean Cleanup, and we're looking into an Inuit charity at the moment. There are a number of opportunities if you wish to support our expedition, probably to suit most, if not all, budgets. We've got opportunities starting from £1,000 to over £1 million, and your involvement is dictated by the level of money you could put into the expedition. Many packages for many budgets. So if you are interested in supporting us in this groundbreaking expedition, then please get in contact with me. I'd be delighted to hear from you, and we can take things further then. And with that, I'll conclude this little presentation and leave you with a little bit about our social media, web presence there, and just swap onto my email address if you want to contact me.
Leven, thanks so much for that very thorough overview of the expedition. It certainly raised a number of questions in my mind, and it's great that it also has sparked some activity in the chat room as well, and perhaps we can look to cover off some of those questions in due course. But before we get to that point, John, Solis, I suppose, have put their money where your mouth is and agreed to sponsor the expedition, which is fantastic news. What is it, I suppose, that motivated Solis and yourself to support an expedition of this nature? Sorry, John, I think you might be on mute there.
I think we're back. My interest in all forms of polar exploration started when I was a boy at nautical school in Hull, and we attended magic lantern slides that were that involved photographs from Shackleton's open boat journey from Antarctica to Elephant Island, and the rest of the 1914-16 expedition. And that was from the cook on Shackleton's expedition. And it was that initial interest with seafarers from Hull, and with a little bit of information to go on, it was incredible to learn how many Hull seafarers took part in polar exploration, not least with the Northwest Passage. And I've followed and researched and some of the expeditions ever since. As Solis, when we first became aware of this expedition, it immediately provoked our interest, not least because of our operations throughout our careers working west and east coast of Canada, and on the west coast with the Ministry of the Environment of British Columbia. So we're very in tune with some of the issues of the Northwest Passage, and our engineering naval architects have done a lot of work into hull forms and environmental issues to do with propulsion, and providing the best the best hull forms and systems for boats to minimise environmental impact. So when we heard about the expedition, it was an opportunity to say, anything we can do to help, we'd be delighted, and that led on to a sponsorship, so that we can actually vicariously enjoy the row from the comfort of our armchairs. And that's where my exploration interests sort of ceases, but we're very much looking forward to seeing the preparations, the logistics, and everything else that goes into this great movement.
Yeah, John, thanks for that. And I think we all look forward to seeing how this row progresses, hearing on their training rows, and finally when they get to Port Inlet to start the expedition. And of course, it's fascinating that your interest in polar exploration started when you were a cadet at Hull. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have a tour of Hull Trinity House, and the artifacts they have from various polar expeditions is truly incredible, and really goes to demonstrate the very proud heritage that Hull has in that area. However, Phil, great to have you with us today. I understand obviously that all of these things cost quite a lot of money, as Leven demonstrated earlier in his slides. But I understand that you've taken quite an interesting route to fundraising, partly due to the current sort of COVID-19 restrictions, I suppose. Perhaps you could talk a bit about that and how people viewing the webinar today can support you.
Yes, I mean, obviously, as you rightly say, it's in COVID times, and as Leven outlined, this expedition, there's quite a cost to actually taking 3 boats to the Arctic, and the cruise and doing the challenge. So initially we went out traditional route looking for sponsors and did our fundraising. Found that very difficult. People were obviously going through the challenges of COVID and keeping their heads down a little bit. So we thought we'd do something slightly different, and come up with our own product line, if you like. And I think it was Leven and Jack mentioned whiskey, and then gin came in. And we've run with that, really, and developed our own Northwest Passage Expedition gin. And for people on the call today, and also going forward from today for a week or so, we're able to offer that gin at a 10% discount to Maritime London members and those associated with Maritime London. So we're very pleased to do that.
That's great, Phil, and I really encourage those people who are viewing this webinar to visit the online shop and purchase some of the excellent products and gin, of course, that the team have on offer there. Now, just
one thing about that, I just to reiterate, the gin's made in Orkney, where actually the majority of people who went to the Hudson Bay came from the Orkney Islands when they were exploring the 17th and 18th century. And the water used from the same well that Sir John Franklin and Captain James Cook used in Orkney has been used in our gin, as well as botanicals, which are common between the Orkneys and the Hudson Bay area. So there's a nice historical link there between the gin, obviously, and the challenge we're doing.
That's a great narrative, and I understand you're even going to plan to visit the distillery on your training row, hopefully coming up later in the year, and perhaps we can touch a bit on that later in the webinar. Now, just sort of, I suppose, moving on to the row itself. One thing I've discovered about myself is that whilst I'm just about palatable in relatively small doses, I'm certainly not somebody that anybody would want to spend a long period of time with, particularly in a confined space. In that context, how do you go about selecting the crew? What sort of characteristics are you looking for? And I'm sure it's a lot more than just having someone who is physically capable of taking on what is going to be a significant physical challenge. Leven, as expedition leader, perhaps it's right for you to kick off on that one.
Thanks, Joss. Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, in this expedition, my life was made a lot easier because the vast majority of people on this expedition, we know pretty well. We've worked with before, and we've been with them, so to speak, in throughout their voyages and in some very high pressure environments. So it made selection for this particular expedition very much easier. But I'm very much character based. I believe in the philosophy that you can learn skills, but you can't really teach character. So everybody who's on this expedition, I just have a good insight into their character. We know what they've done in the past, and whether they're going to fit in with our expedition. So that's really how we've been selecting people for this expedition.
I think from my perspective, obviously from my trip, the one key thing that everybody in a crew needs to have is the ability to compromise at some point. Most likely everybody in the crew will think they're right at quite often during the course of the journey, and that them thinking they're right doesn't necessarily mean the other people on the boat think they're right. So you've got to have some degree of compromise, and realise that actually you're on that boat to enjoy yourself and to deliver on a mission, and you've got to sometimes just think, okay, I've got to, on this particular occasion, bite my tongue and move on. Because there's no space on a boat for argument. You can't escape a 9-meter boat very easily. The conversations you're going to have. So we've got to be a bit flexible. I think that's one of the experiences that Leven's looking for: people who've actually been in that challenging situation and have learned to actually deal as part of a team in an extreme environment.
Yeah, I hear there's also plenty of islands in the Northwest Passage to get marooned on.
I think we were going through, and one of the interesting questions that came through on the chat, and particularly in the context of the crew, was your sort of calorie intake. I mean, given the amount of physical exertion which is going to take place, and in the extreme cold, how many calories are you going to be having to digest, and what sort of food are you going to be taking on board? I suppose.
Shall I take that, Leven, as a question? Because it's about 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. Certainly on the Atlantic trip it was. I would have thought with the cold it must be a bit more. And it tends to be sort of, on that trip, it was definitely dehydrated food, which you then obviously pour in boiling water. Although I know Jack, one of the crew, is trying to get us basically food, which is just basically, squeeze, suck in and go type of thing. So stuff which is already pre-prepared that you don't have to heat up. Because one of the biggest dangers on the boat, as I'm sure Leven will tell you, is actually boiling water. Because obviously boiling water on a rocky boat isn't a good thing to have. So I don't know what you'd comment on that, Leven.
Yeah, I mean, rations are always something that have been kind of close to my heart. On the first expedition, the army very kindly donated 100 rations, and 80 out of 100 of them were exactly the same. So I was very keen on my next expedition to have a little bit of variety in the ration packs. But what I've also found about these small boats and the environment in an ocean rowing boat is that most people, unless you're really lucky, go into what I would term as a form of shock in the first week. So you're leaving an environment where you've got a bed and a sort of a normal life-ish routine, and then you're entering the environment of the boat where it's you're rowing for 2 hours, resting for 2 hours. You're not getting very much sleep, and what sleep you are getting is pretty low quality. And so the thing that tends to suffer is that when you stop rowing, is you have this automatic question which says, will I go to sleep or will I eat something? And you get so embroiled in sleep deprivation that sleep often is the priority over food, and to try and mitigate that. We've always had a very snack orientated, high calorie orientated ration bag that doesn't need much cooking. But as you get into the expedition, later on, where you got used to the routine, the punishing environment, and your teammates around you, that's where a good hot meal can just be absolute ambrosia out there, and it's such a morale boost to have something to look forward to as well.
I think on my first row, certainly food was a big problem in the first week. I wasn't eating enough, I wasn't drinking enough. I started, because I was exercising, you're rowing 12 hours a day. I was starting to slur my words. I just wasn't in a really good place. And I thought I should be eating more, but I didn't want to eat more. So, I went through exactly the cycle that Leven says. And then after about a week or so, I started being able to just eat a bit more. And I think other people from outside say, don't get hung up on it. Just eat what you can, when you can, and then gradually get in the rhythm. And I think that's what, you have to do. Joss, you've gone silent again.
You hear me now?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. Just thinking about how you get to the start line. We're currently under intense travel restrictions. You are looking to row a relatively new type of boat, which has largely been untested. How do you ensure that the team gets the right sort of training, the boat gets the right sort of testing, etc., as you get ready for the expedition next year? Leven, probably best to start with you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ice class will see its first action in the Northwest Passage. It's based on the hull that we're very, very familiar with. In fact, that goes back to the 1990s in terms of the midsection, at least, where we focused on stability. One of the things is, as an ocean rower, I noticed about the design of many tested ocean rowing boats is that the naval architect tends to hear the word displacement and base the hull in a semicircle, because that's the most efficient shape technically for that. But as a rower, what you need is a strong, stable platform. And we had the pleasure of rowing a French boat called La Mondiale, which, in my slightly biased opinion, might still have been the fastest boat in the world, if she was still about. And her lines were unlike any other ocean rowing boat that I'd seen at the time. But getting the logistics of getting three such boats to the start line. We've opened up conversations with Joshua Arick, who's the mayor of Pondon, who's been most helpful in that regard. And with regard to COVID, we posed the question to Joshua, in fact, last year about the COVID situation, and he was saying, come back to us in February and see what the world's like. As far as getting this extra year, it opens up all sorts of opportunities for us to train together as a team that wouldn't have been open to us had we pressed ahead in 2021. So, I mean, the delay is a blessing in disguise as far as the team is concerned, because 2020 was a devil of a year to get a team together and to train properly. So we've mapped out as best we can, as COVID still rages, a training regime for this summer that involves practicing hauling the boats over obstacles, getting the teams together where we're allowed, and we've got a couple of trips planned for the summer. But the one that I'm most excited about so far is actually having at least two of the three boats rowing from Newcastle up to Orkney. And we're going to visit the distillery where the Northwest Passage expedition gin is produced, and then row back home again.
I think from my perspective as just one of the crew, my training at the moment, because we thought we were going to go this year until we decided not to, is basically spending a lot of time on Zoom and in my garage. So I'm rowing 3 times a week with the Tyne Rowing Club on rowing machines in my garage, and then another 3 times a week on different days I'm doing strength and conditioning. And that's, it's not the same training on your own. I must admit, even though there's other guys you can see, other girls you can see, that's great, but it's just not the same. So I think to some extent, the deferral, obviously the right decision from a COVID perspective, but actually from a crew perspective is maybe the right thing as well. We've got to make sure we know how these boats work and how we work together as a team. So yeah, I think the Newcastle Orkney expedition will be a good test for all of us.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And just looking at the row itself, so to speak, and we've had a couple of questions in the chat about these sorts of things. One from Neil asking the question that I'm sure is on most people's lips, but they're far too polite to ask. Given the duration of the row or the length of the row, how do you go about dealing with washing and bodily functions and all of those practical parts of life that are not so easy when you're on a relatively small rowing boat?
I'll maybe answer that because I went on a mixed crew, which makes it interesting on my Atlantic row with Claire. And Claire's actually part of the team doing the Arctic row as well. I think Claire would say she's the first one who went to the loo. There's a yellow bucket and actually it's just behind us, if you like, about a foot and a half away when you're on the boat. And obviously I tried not to go for about 3 or 4 days, but you can't put it off. So eventually you just get on with it. It'll be a bit colder in the Arctic, I'm sure, to sit there. But that's what you do in terms of cleaning. I think making sure you are clean is really important. So on the Atlantic row, it's just making sure all your, let's be blunt, your delicate areas are kept very clean. Because if they're not, you're on a moving seat 12 hours a day, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and you're getting lots of wear and tear, potential for other, infections to happen. So just keep yourself clean all the time. So that's what I did. I had a routine of making sure, everywhere was properly cleaned down. I don't know what you'd want to comment on that, Leven.
Yeah, no, that's very fair to say. As I say, when all of our rubbish gets kept on board. We have composting options for the waste as well. But yeah, I mean, on my very first row when I was very green, a rookie, one of the things that really took hold was saltwater sores, and it was just really down to, I mean, again, this getting into this routine, and over the course of the next few expeditions, you just discover that hygiene and cleanliness keep a lot of these little niggles away, and where you do get niggles, they stop them from climbing up the pain scale to something that's really quite distracting, let's say.
And that segues into another really interesting question here. And I think, and I've got a friend who actually rode the Atlantic, and he kept his clothing down to a minimum due to friction and things like this when he did it. You're going to be rowing in -5 temperatures. That's not going to be an option for you, although, Leven, I understand that you have a penchant for T-shirts in all weathers. But what sort of clothing are you guys going to be wearing, and what sort of considerations are you taking in regards to that when it comes to the practical implications of rowing, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, the clothing system is a layered system. We're actually potentially working with a sponsor on that final setup for clothing, but very much a layered system, and which can cater for spikes down into quite negative temperatures. The fuel cells that we're using on board the boats will raise the ambient temperature inside the cabins if we really have to hold up. And as I say, we're carrying enough fuel for almost 4 months. But yeah, I mean, a layered system on clothing, but also helped with the internal power systems on board the boat as far as temperature spikes go.
And we've had a question in from the Maritime London chairman, Lord Mount Evans, whose family actually have a very proud history in Antarctic exploration. But anyhow, that's a story for another time. His question goes about, in terms of, are you concerned, and Leven, you touched on this briefly in your introduction, but are you concerned about polar bears and grizzly bears, et cetera, I suppose, given that you'll be hoping to be in the middle of the Northeast Passage and solidly in the water for the duration of your trip? It shouldn't be too much of an issue. But are these the sorts of factors that you're considering? And I suppose, in general, what are your primary safety concerns coming into the challenge? Phil, why don't we start with you there?
I just noticed a message from Paul saying what stroke rate would we be going at, and I thought, well, if there's a polar bear, we'd go from 80 to 40. Because I'm not sure actually we could. I don't know, Leven, we can outrow a polar bear because they can go at 6 miles an hour, and we'd be about 4 knots. So I must admit I haven't given it a great deal of thought. I hope we see them in the distance and we don't interfere with them, and they don't interfere with us. So I think just being sensible as we see wildlife to keep that safe distance, I would say. So I haven't talked to my wife about it, and I'm not going to until I come back.
Yeah, I mean the biggest dangers, I think, as far as I'm concerned, the weather and wildlife. We're carrying, or we will carry, anti-bear measures. Most of them will just be loud bangs and avoidance. But I was, one of the things is that we're always. The Northwest Passage is in fact one of these nightmares for ocean rowers, because usually our objective is to get away from land as soon as we possibly can. But in the Northwest Passage, it's not only the land, but it's the ice that you've got to avoid as well. And this is where the word stop comes in pretty handy, in that a lot of these safety concerns would be one, if you were gung-ho, that you would find yourself in a bit of a pickle. And my extensive experience in ocean rowing is, if you're gung-ho, you do get yourselves into pickles. And the word stop is certainly something that I'm more than happy to do. So combined with weather forecasting, we simply won't go into places that we're at risk of getting caught into, and a very low risk approach is going to be taken to these situations. So avoidance is always the key. And if we do find ourselves in a pickle, then we have the ability to haul the boats up onto the beach, haul the boats up onto the ice. In fact, we've got a great system from the fire brigade that allows us to lift enormous weights and from multiple anchorage points. And of course, one of the great advantages of having 3 boats with 5 people in them, and I noticed this covered one of the other questions about the boats individually going their separate directions or staying together. The idea is certainly to keep them together, because many hands make light work. So if we do find ourselves in a situation, then we have 15 bodies to throw at it, if we need to. And in many tasks, it doesn't make that easy, but it makes it a little bit easier or a little bit faster.
Joss, you've gone quiet again.
We're coming to the end of our allotted time, but given the technical issues, etc., I think we can continue for a few minutes longer, unless our presenters have anywhere else to go to. But Leven, you mentioned in your presentation, of course, the costs associated to all these sorts of things, and the technical expertise that you will require to successfully complete the expedition. To those ends, I suppose there's 2 points that are worth raising. I mean, certainly, Phil, I'm aware that you're spearheading an innovative fundraising campaign through the selling of your own gin and various other merchandise. But on the wider picture, I suppose, what is the sort of support that you're looking for, and the sort of partners that you'd like to attract? I suppose, Phil, why don't we start with you and your gin, etc.
Well, I suppose it's, in terms of the gin, obviously we're in times of COVID, I suppose, and actually going out and reaching out to sponsors is quite difficult. Normally you'd knock on people's doors and you go and see them. Nowadays it's trying to go through Zoom, but we're very lucky that one of our rowers lives in Orkney, and that was the last port of call for lots of explorers going to the Arctic and to the Hudson Bay. In fact, the Hudson Bay Company took a lot of people from Orkney there. So we've done a deal with a distillery and managed to develop our own gin, which I hold a bottle up, Northwest Passage Expedition Gin. And we went through a lengthy tasting process to make sure we got the right botanics. And we're delighted to have launched that in October as just one of the means of trying to raise the funds. You know, it won't by any means obviously meet our requirements in total at all, but it's actually, you've got to try and do innovative things yourself, I think, to try and generate interest in the project. But you know, Leven, maybe you'd like to go through you know, the other process we're going through.
Yeah, I mean, the expedition is actively looking for sponsors. We've got a good array of sponsors already, but we're looking to partner up with companies who you know, want to emphasize their credentials about being concerned with the environment. You know, other products that may need that are useful to us, that need testing in these rigorous environments, and of course, you know, the ethos of the expedition. I mean, you know, apart from the environment and climate change, like so many companies that come together, you know, we're just ordinary people trying to do something extraordinary, and we're trying to do so, you know, with you know, as little fuss as possible, but trying to get a powerful message out there. And if that empathizes with your company, then, you know, come and speak to us, because it's a great thing to be involved in, and it's a great message to send out to your clients and your staff.
I think that's the key point. I think for anybody sort of following something like this, it's nice that companies sponsor us, but the people who get interested are the company's employees, the employees' families, their wider network, who start following an expedition like this, and you know, they'll actually be able to track us through the Arctic. We'll actually have a sort of beacons on the boat, which will be on an app, which, you know, people can follow, as well as obviously on our social media under, you know, NWP Expedition. So there's lots of podcasts and other stories that are coming out all the time, not just about us, but actually relating to other people that we meet along the way. For example, there's one based on New York University, who are doing some, you know, giving us some packages so we can do some research on the journey. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. It's not just about, you know, the 15 crew. It's actually about the whole expedition, and it's a good journey. You know, if people join early enough as sponsors, it's a good journey for them to be on. And I think the biggest requirement we always have, you know, from word go, is actually cash, because, you know, you can't build the boat and get going until you have cash. So it's always nice to get people offering equipment, you know, with discounts and everything else. But the big drive and the biggest challenge we've got is to try to generate cash to actually pay for those we have to pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I say, if anyone listening wants to get behind this in the same way that Solis did, or know someone who might be interested, then you know where Phil and Leven are, and do get in touch with them. Just sort of moving back to some of the questions that are coming in. A question from a couple of people that's arisen is, how are you actually going to get all the hardware over to Pond Inlet to start the expedition in the first place?
I hope
Leven. Yeah,
Well,
that's the surprise that Leven's got planned for you all, Phil.
Yeah. Yes, we're setting off from Newcastle and rowing to Orkney, Faroes, Iceland, Greenland. But no, I mean, there are a number of ways, and some of that's dependent on budget. But the intention, in fact, is to get the boats there nice and early, via a freighter that calls into Pond Inlet in August. And but we're looking at other options as well. I mean, we've been talking to a number of people, and, you know, some of the questions that have been coming up, and I'm sorry we probably won't get to answer them all, is that, you know, I would emphasize that, you know, a lot of these questions are not about events; they're about a process, and, you know, things like the transport to the start at the. You know, when we have options of hiring a Hercules if our budget you know, is large enough, and then there's the option of transporting later on this year to somewhere like Ottawa or Montreal or Newfoundland, and then getting them in position for next summer. I mean, again, with sensitivities to the COVID situation, because with all the best will in the world, we don't know, and I don't know anybody who does know what the world's going to look like in summer 2022. But of course, as a team, we will be monitoring that, and to put any fears, we won't be doing anything silly or imposing on anybody that doesn't want us.
And I think the last question from me, I suppose, in this is, it's going to be cold. You've got a long way to go. You're going to be limited in terms of what you can eat. You're going to be stuck on a boat with the same people for a significant period of time. You can do various things in a bucket. Is it fun? Do you enjoy this? I'm sure when you finished, you look back on it and think, yeah, that was a great achievement and I'm really pleased I did it. But when you're in the midst of it, are you there enjoying yourself? I suppose. And Phil, why don't we start with you on that one?
The most fun I had in the Atlantic crossing was 1,000 miles from land, when it was most likely over 2 miles deep, just getting into the water. I was skipper of that trip, so I allowed 2 of the other crew to get in the water first, and once I made sure there are no sharks, I then got in. But that was the highlight, I suppose. There are times when it's quite monotonous. You're just putting in your shift, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. It does knacker you a fair bit. Highlight at the beginning, setting off, highlight at the end, finishing, and a few moments in between. And then, in fact, you can bore people for the next 30 years about what you've achieved, I suppose, and they'll avoid you at all costs. I don't know what you'd say, Leven.
Yeah, Leven, 30,000 nautical miles under your belt. There must have been some of those times that you look back and thought, yeah, no, this is absolutely where I want to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of you that wants to remember all the times of hurt and anguish and missing home and being cold and wet and miserable and tired and you name it. That's it. But there is that huge attraction to one of the last great wildernesses in the world that is the planet's oceans. And having experienced the ocean as a solo ocean rower, where I spent 4 months in my own company, to large team events, with 14 people on a single boat. There's plenty that mitigates the pain and the anguish and missing home. But it's odd, in fact, what happens at the end of an ocean row, because everybody is asked, really, would you do that again? And almost unanimously, the answer is no, never. But then ask them in about 6 weeks after that, and the wilderness has a strange magnetism to it that just draws you back out.
Lovely. Yeah, sorry, John, go for it.
Sorry, just before it drifts a little bit, just a comment on the sponsorship funding side of things. I'd just like to endorse what I think Phil said regarding the interest it generates by being involved. And as an armchair rower, it is amazing. Everybody we work with and everybody we're involved with, if it's ever brought up as a topic of conversation, the level of interest that people have in a real challenge. And not to forget that a great many of the attempts that were made on the Northwest Passage were not by ship alone. I mean, they were overland as well. And for this to be a full rowing passage is quite well, it is extraordinary. And very and finally, on the products, I can mention the gin. I would not start my day without it. I can endorse that personally.
Well,
Breakfast of champions and armchair everywhere.
John, I think that's an excellent note to end on. As I say, it's been a great pleasure having all three of you on today. I think it's incredible what you guys are looking to undertake. We at Maritime London look forward to following your progress very slowly, very closely even. Apologies to all of those for the technical difficulties that we had, but occasionally these things do happen, and all relying on home broadband connections and all the rest of it. But thanks for bearing with us. It's been a really enjoyable session, and as I say, we will certainly be in touch with a full recording of the webinar, with the links through to being able to purchase the merchandise, etc., etc. And we will keep everyone up to date with how the team progresses as they head towards Pond Inlet in 2022. So thank you all again, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks very much.
I think just from us, saying thank you very much to Solis for sponsoring us, and for you at Maritime London for giving us a platform to just talk about what we're doing. And do follow us. It will be one hell of a journey.
Great. Lovely. Thank you all so much. Have great rest of the days, everyone. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from Phil, Leven, and the team in the not too distant future. Thanks very much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.